see MarineLorD spawning on the east side of the map as the French. And on the west, we have the dreaded Viper and the Delhi Sultanate.
Ooh, Delhi versus French. This is a pretty classic matchup, something that you could see a lot on the ladder. I'm curious to see how Viper is going to play this one, though. MarineLorD going straight away into his base, trying to get some sheep, and he's actually going to be pretty successful doing that. Obviously, Viper isn't going to complain about that. Look at that, it's already 12 sheep at 130. That's a great start for MarineLorD. Good news for Viper is that he wants the berries only, so he doesn't care about sheep. The bad news is that this means that MarineLorD has a ton of food to work with.
Yeah, certainly it'll help him accentuate going into the feudal age and paying for that aggression if he chooses to go that route. That is certainly a great feeling for sure. But like you said, Delhi Sultanate can play the berry bushes pretty well. But you know, if they do get through that first berry bush and then they don't have sheep to fall back on, they might have to overextend themselves, go out into the open field, maybe get some more berry bushes out away from their base, and that gives the French the opportunity to harry and harass. I mean, it's still, even if you are Delhi, I think it's very pertinent to have some sheep back in the base in case you're being pressured hard and the periphery of your base is under huge pressure. Being able to fall back to those sheep, I still think is super valuable.
I 100% agree with you. That is the thing, that for every civilization, those sheep also act as sort of a fallback option. And especially on a high-level game where you really are facing a ton of pressure from your opponent, potentially, having that fallback option to avoid running out of food completely or having your food income denied is imperative. So that is something that's great here for MarineLorD, because Viper is not going to have a lot of backup food, and he himself will be able to work with a lot. So that's a great start here for MarineLorD. Viper, on the other hand, he went for a very early mosque. So he, in fact, already finished the efficient production upgrade. So he's getting piety. Obviously, Sanctity was moved to Feudal Age, so he right now cannot get Sanctity. So the idea here is that you start grabbing Piety, which is going to give extra HP for your Scholars, and when you get to Feudal, you stop researching it, you don't lose your progress with the Delhi, which means that you can switch to Sanctity, and then once Sanctity is done, you can switch back to Piety.
Pretty interesting. You know, that's something that, at least to me, seems a little bit, different. I mean, I'm so used to seeing efficient production being prioritized in the earlier ages just to make sure you can kind of match the aggression of the French with your own unit production. But seeing the piety, of course, gives you a lot of play in terms of, claiming the sacred sites, right? Your scholars are less likely to get picked off. They can survive a little bit longer on the open field against perhaps scout harass or even maybe an extra lance attack from the French knights. That's kind of a cool innovation for sure.
Yeah, that is definitely helpful. I mean, especially against French knights, you really want to make sure that you don't lose those precious scholars. Bit of a scout dance over here. It looks very fancy, all that micro back and forth, and ultimately someone's gonna disengage, scouts heal back up, and we'll pretend that nothing happened.
Yeah, they got the magical healing. Don't know how they did it in these ancient times, but we don't ask questions here. But I would say that, man, in my experience of all the games I've casted in MarineLorD, he has got some incredible scout micro. Some of the stuff I remember back when, oh my god, when animation canceling was a thing, he was so good at doing that with those scouts. And here we do have the landmark coming up from the Delhi. Looks like the French might be a little bit ahead in terms of getting their feudal age, but will we be seeing an early knight coming out? I feel like early knight harass is very effective against the Delhi.
Yeah, definitely it is, especially because the Delhi doesn't have a barracks just yet. It seems like the first knight is now being queued up by MarineLorD Viper, yet to reach feudal age over here. And the question becomes, how is Viper going to deal with those early knights coming in here?
Yeah.
Because now he's building a barracks, so he's going to play fairly defensive at the beginning, I guess, and he's going to wait for those upgrades to come in, because that's where the Delhi really get their power. We often talk about, sacred sites, berries, but let's not overlook the fact that they can get all their upgrades for free. So the moment they reach feudal, they will click the lumberjacking upgrade, they'll click the mining upgrade, they will go for early blacksmith and start grabbing those upgrades, and when all of those kick in at the same time, they get a massive power spike compared to a civ like French.
Oh yeah, man, it's got to be one of the most gratifying feelings of the game playing Delhi, and just getting like all those free upgrades. And it looks like we do have the efficient production going down, so we did indeed research that. Spear's coming out very, very quickly. You can see how quickly he was able to produce a spear in a couple seconds there, forcing back the scout harass. Obviously, with Delhi, you still do need a little bit of gold there to build your scholars at least, but the first French knight is coming out, might be able to pick off this spearman. Spearman not braced for the attack, could be getting hit in the back. Will a scholar come out to heal him? Nice micro right there. Look at that. Beautiful scholar play, able to essentially save that spearman from the old French knight.
That is great micro over there for Viper. He loves doing that. He loves pulling back weak and injured units, heal them back up. He does that a lot with the HRE using the prelates. He does that a lot with the Delhi over here. And professional scouts coming in here for MarineLorD. So he's actually going to grab professional scouts for himself. That's going to be a ton of food to work with. I mean, he already has a lot of sheep, professional scouts over here. I love that. Because Viper isn't really contesting map control right now, and MarineLorD could easily get all 4 of those deer patches for himself.
Oh, certainly. I mean, the deer are certainly on the table, but we do see an archery range as well, which is certainly going to be indicative of more early pressure. Looking to go pedal to the metal here against the Delhi Sultanate. And the Delhi was actually forced off those berry bushes. So just like we talked about, they were forced back to the main base where they had a couple sheep, not too many, but now it's mainly just going to be MarineLorD kind of poking and harassing until he can probably get a critical mass of archers. Meanwhile, playing the pro scouts, like you said, and just, feasting, enjoying, living his best life.
Yeah, range is now being added by MarineLorD, so we're going to see some archers hit the field. Whereas for Viper, he's dropping a stable, so it's going to be that good old-fashioned knights and archers versus spearmen horsemen combo. And we've used to seeing a lot of that in like this February-March meta. And in those games, the tendency was that the spearmen horsemen play is actually able to overwhelm the knights and archers. So composition-wise, I get the impression that Viper could have the edge, especially once he has the defense upgrade for those units. He's already grabbing the range defense upgrade to start with.
You know what else I think is really cool about the spear horseman composition is it's a little bit more dynamic in what it can provide to the game, right? With the spear archer, you're mainly going to have more of a static blob moving around that can provide a little bit of map control. Of course, Delhi can build walls with their infantry, which is always cool. But with the horsemen, should you be able to stabilize from the initial pressure, you then have a unit that can provide you map control. The horsemen can transition to a harassing role. They can do a lot of funny business on the map. They can hunt down enemy scholars, camp relics. Clear out sacred sites. They can definitely do a little bit more than say the archers could in terms of that position.
Yeah, that's a great point, and of course, horsemen do have a slightly higher mobility than the knights as well, so it's a little easier for you to maneuver around with those, and Viper so far playing a fairly defensive game over here. He's not really going to get punished by MarineLorD for that, so while MarineLorD does have professional scouts, MarineLorD is not playing 2 town centers. I guess he was a little too afraid of the Delhi push in feudal. But if MarineLorD was playing 2 town centers here, he could easily punish Viper even more than what he's accomplishing right now. It's still a good spot for MarineLorD though, because, I mean, he's already building up a villager lead, he's going to have professional scouts at the hunt. Oh, Viper finishing up the upgrades though. We're getting closer and closer to that power spike.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. Obviously, we see the mining and lumber upgrades in terms of blacksmith upgrades as well. But we have our first skirmish. It looks like the horsemen are going to be targeting down the archers, but the spearmen are not far behind. Spearmen able to push back the knights, and it looks like we are going to see a couple archer picks. And honestly, it looks like Viper is going to be in a pretty commanding position here, as the archers were a little bit overextended, and the knights are not able to protect them. It looks like it is going to be a rout, and the MarineLorD is going to be forced back while the Viper tries to... Do Vipers actually constrict their prey, or is it more of like a biting thing? I've always wondered about the analogy there. Do you know?
Well, I don't. So that's a piece of information I'm unfortunately missing.
Yeah, I was kind of curious. He's constricting his prey. It works. But that was a beautiful fight for sure. And the French were indeed pushed back here. And now Delhi might have an opportunity to move out and grab some sacred sites behind this.
Yeah, and this is where the power spike of the Delhi starts to build up. And it looks like we're going to have a bit of a fight in the middle for this sacred site, but number is looking way better for Viper. And while of course you can heal up those French knights with chivalry, Viper can also heal up his injured units with those scholars. And looks like Viper is committing to this fight.
Yeah, certainly. It looks like he's trying to engage, but the horsemen are right on top of those archers and are just doing excellent damage. And the piety, of course, might come into play as well, as those Delhi scholars are going to be a little bit tankier, but we will see if there's going to be some sort of a tower follow-up behind this. But man, Viper's getting super aggressive, picking off tons of archers here, forcing the gold villagers off for the French, which is going to be inhibiting their knight production down the road. And overall, I would say a decent little engagement there for the MarineLorD, but a couple of French knights and archers did go down, relatively even in terms of attrition. And the sacred site has been taken by Delhi, and the southern sacred site is also being pressured as well. So Delhi is just taking over the map right now.
Yeah, and this is getting concerning over here for MarineLorD because he's not specifically losing fights, but he's also not winning them, and this is where the Delhi Bowl starts to build up. You see, walls are being made with potentially some spearmen or some archers from Viper, but Viper is grabbing those blacksmith upgrades. He's going to have those sacred sites walled in potentially, and while MarineLorD wasn't specifically losing fights, he wasn't winning them either, and now Viper is going to capitalize on those eco upgrades and that map control. Such a classic Delhi play. Yeah. And it's so difficult to stop. Like, MarineLorD is doing all the right things, but this is just hard to stop.
Yeah, certainly. And I love the fact that he's walling the sacred sites. I think that's one of my favorite things in the game when the Delhi military units will start walling off those sacred sites. So the middle sacred site is going to be taken most likely by the MarineLorD here. But in the meantime, Delhi does have the southern sacred site. So they're certainly going to be getting a ton of gold, which will help them push up to Castle Age. Will he get the sacred site up top? He does get it. The French knight arrives a little bit late to the party. And now he's going to be riding down that scholar. But the scholar might live, especially thanks to that piety upgrade, which you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You want to keep those scholars alive because obviously replacing them is going to be costly for you, but it's more about having those scholars on the battlefield. If you lose one, you will have to walk all the way from your base to those sacred sites again. So it is just such a hassle. It's much easier to try and keep them alive, obviously. And right now, Viper is controlling 2 sacred sites. The thing is that it's a dream for him to control 3, so that's not something that he can really build on.
Yeah.
If he can control 2 consistently, pretty nice. The concern for him, though, is that he's adding farms, which is quite uncharacteristic of the Delhi at this stage. You would expect them to be a lot more aggressive towards the berries rather than just transitioning to farms.
Yeah, certainly. Maybe just considering the knight presence that the French have on the map, he's going to be taking a more conservative approach to make sure he doesn't get caught out in the open. You know, the berry bushes are quite far away from the main base, and he is still working them as well. But I mean, if they are caught there, he's probably going to lose all those villagers. But now, like we kind of talked about earlier, we do see the knights of the Delhi, not knights, excuse me, the horsemen on the southern side of the map looping around the back. So we have a bit of a dual-pronged attack here from the Viper, an engagement in the front, which he might not win per se, but there's going to be back pressure coming from these 8 or 9 horsemen.
And that's the thing, that's what you get with efficient production, an overwhelming mess, and you can afford to split up your army. You can't really split up an army of archers and knights. You can't detach your knights from the archers because the moment you do that, the horsemen will start killing you. And you see, now the horsemen are moving in. It's going to be at least 1 villager being picked. Viper, playing this one cautiously though, he's not actually jumping on the lumberjacks. He possibly could have done that, but he probably would have risked losing some more horsemen there.
Yeah, certainly. I think in total we saw about 2 or 3 villager kills right there, so certainly worth it, and I don't think a single horseman went down. So like you said, maybe Viper will pull back the injured horsemen and heal them with the scholars in the main base. But MarineLorD is doing a pretty good job pushing out as well and nullifying several sacred sites. Down on the southern side of the map, we didn't actually see the Great Wall of Delhi being finished to secure that. And man, look at that scholar getting away with like 1 shot, the dreaded piety coming in and saving that bad boy. But middle's going to be decapped here, and it looks like Delhi is going to be pushed off. Oh, and he's finished off. And Delhi is going to be losing most of their sacred sites, it looks like. But they still got a ton of gold from it. It was worth it.
Yeah, it was worth it. Like, if you control that sacred site for like 30 seconds to a minute, you get back the investment on your scholars, so it was already worth it. Gotta love how MarineLorD didn't pursue that 1 scholar with the entire army. He just sent 1 archer to pick off that scholar that had so low HP left. You still have 2 groups of units over here for Viper though, and he's going to put up some pressure on that gold mine, while also having sufficient forces to defend over here. Looks like he's committing to both of those engagements.
Certainly. The French army is looking relatively scary here. They have a big critical mass of the knights at this point. Although the big flank coming in the back, the horsemen do get that nice rear charge, forcing back some of the French knights, but the spearmen numbers are starting to look relatively low. I think I only see 4 or 5 spearmen. MarineLorD doing an excellent job of sniping those spearmen out, and that's going to mean the French knights are just going to be tyrannical, running over this army and just massacring the horsemen here.
Yeah, that is exceptional micro over there for MarineLorD. Make no mistake, clicking those spearmen in that chaotic group of units is so difficult, and that is an A+ tier of micro there, really. Exceptional moves from MarineLorD, and now Viper getting pushed back all the way inside his base with no sacred site control at all.
Yeah, and it's not like his eco is like that amazing either. He does have those farms, which, you know, now that he's lost map control, are going to end up being a little bit more important. Although he does get that top sacred site, which is quite nice. Maybe that will buy him a little bit of time here. But overall, MarineLorD is rocking 55 villagers against the 48 of the old Viper here. Wonder if Viper's going to be trying to get a scholar down south. But, you know, the sacred site giving him a little bit of dough. Up north, do we see any inclination of a Castle Age on the horizon for either players? It does not look like it. Looks like MarineLorD's going to be going pure feudal aggression here. And I do not think Viper can afford to try and save up for Castle because his military would be too weak, and he could be in the danger zone there.
Yeah, I don't think that either of these players want to risk it. And you see, Viper is trying to get those sacred sites for himself. He was even healing that spearman that was fighting the archer, trying to wall off that sacred site. But that's where the knights are coming in. And you can sometimes afford to detach those knights from your archers, especially if the archers are safe back at home, and they just send out 15-20 knights to decap that sacred site. And we're reaching that critical mass of knights as well, where they really start becoming intimidating. We're looking at 16 archers or 16 knights rather, and 20 archers, as opposed to Viper, who does have 15 horsemen and 10 spears, but you get the impression that now MarineLorD's army is a lot scarier.
Oh, certainly, certainly. Here comes another Knight Harass. Might be able to pick off some villagers to try and bring the numbers down to a more even level, but nonetheless, MarineLorD is pretty close by with his Knights. But great micro there from the Viper, able to get that one horseman away, although it looks like he is going to pay the troll toll and lose a couple of these guys right here. But overall, how many villagers went down? It looks like about 2 or 3 for maybe 3 or 4 horsemen in total. So a bit of a dicey trade there, but no sacred sites for Delhi. They're going to get that berry economy going again there for the French. And it seems like the calm before the storm. Viper spending most of his food and going to the... Oh, he's actually going to Castle Age. So we get the House of Learning coming up. MarineLorD looks like... I don't think he's anywhere near Castle Age. So maybe this is where we see the Dumbo come back?
Oh, maybe, although the elephants would be so slow. And the problem for Viper is that he needs to survive until he gets to Castle Age. And at latest, when MarineLorD gets the notification of Viper getting to Castle Age, he's going to make a push. And
oh yeah, he has to.
I think, yeah, he probably sees the House of Learning and he knows that now is the time. I will not get to Castle Age, I will just go full feudal over here and finish you off before you get to Castle.
Yeah, he's got to get aggressive for sure. Do we see siege engineering? Does he have a blacksmith up yet? I'm not sure if we saw that earlier, but nonetheless, the knights are going to be moving in, but the spearmen do have a decent little defensive concave right there. Also, we have arrow slits on the towers, which is going to be providing a little bit of extra DPS. And now with efficient production, maybe the Delhi Sultanate will be able to make some men-at-arms, like turbo fast, but overall, it looks like MarineLorD able to get some huge pressure in the base, forcing the villagers back to the TC, stopping the farmers. The wood villagers are also, well, not idle per se, but they're in the tower shooting right now, but very, very good pressure here from MarineLorD, putting the numbers down to 47 for the Viper. Currently, MarineLorD sitting at 60. So, and also it looks like he's starting to bank a little bit. You can see MarineLorD's at 600 food and 1,200 gold right now. So I think he's kind of thinking maybe castle as well.
Yeah, he's got a fairly unbalanced eco over here, floating a lot of wood and gold. But what I loved about him is that he idled the food villagers. So, as you pointed out, men-at-arms could have been an option for Viper, but he just didn't have the resources for it. He didn't have the gold, he didn't have the food. And I love the move that MarineLorD just made. He destroyed the market. He knows very well that in a scenario like this, where Viper has part of his eco denied, a market would be imperative. Balance out the eco, get some Castle Age units going. You destroy the market, you prevent your opponent from balancing out the eco, and delay his transition to Castle Age units.
Certainly, and a nice counter harass coming down from the Viper as well, able to pick off 2 villagers right there, and also denying a little bit of food work. He does have his Lancers moving in, so despite the fact that his base is really being pushed super heavily, he's still trying to put pressure on his opponent to maybe equalize the economic situation. But overall, it seems like MarineLorD's harass has been very, very effective. And like you said, Delhi is one of the factions, especially when they have sacred control. They love to use markets to kind of balance out their economy. They're getting a huge influx of gold, so you can kind of buy a little bit of stone if need be for a second TC or a keep or something. But destroying that market really did shut that down.
Yeah, looks like Viper is switching into Lancers over here. Obviously, he's behind in villagers, but let's not forget, he's getting the Castle Age eco upgrades, and I mean all of them, so that's going to help a little bit. The concern for him is that MarineLorD is also getting close to Castle Age, and once it's an even Castle Age battle, the Arbaletria will hit the field, so that's going to make it difficult for the Lancers of Viper to do damage.
Oh, certainly. It's going to be incredibly tough. And yeah, the French crossbows are just absolutely beast. And none of the sacred sites are available. Delhi is also a faction that is incredible at getting the relics on the map, right? Because you get the swiftness, your scholars are just track stars training for the Olympics, running across, grabbing everything. But with MarineLorD's control here, it's going to be tough. And look at this. The French Knights just absolutely cutting through those Lancers, it looks like, just due to sheer numbers. I mean, even though they are feudal against castle, it's just a numbers game at this point. And those Knights are just getting wrecked for the Delhi Sultanate.
Exactly, and of course you do have the bonus damage after a successful charge with those French Knights, and this is part of the reason why the French don't mind being delayed to Castle Age, because their Knights are actually more like Knights Plus in Feudal Age, so they're not as good as Castle Age Knights, but especially given time you can build up your numbers, and they are not as bad as one would think against Castle Age units either. And Viper now securing sacred sites once again, but the concern for him is that now MarineLorD is going to be up to Castle Age, and he's going to have 16 French veteran Royal Knights as opposed to just 8 Lancers over there. Viper's got 9 Scholars, by the way. Holy potatoes.
Yeah, he's got a lot. You know, times are tough for the Delhi Sultanate here, as you can see the big Castle Age upgrades coming in for the Knights here. A little bit of harass up on the eastern side of the map, as a couple of horsemen here for Viper do try and deny some villagers. No kills there. And those Knights for the Viper are being picked off in open field. I believe a couple just went down there. But at least one sacred site is taken, but I mean, it's only going to be there for a couple seconds. He might get like a couple ticks of gold here, but yeah, for the most part, MarineLorD is going to be able to get in there and deny this, and it really is just more or less going to be a loss for Delhi.
Yeah, this is the problem for Viper. MarineLorD is just not letting him grab those sacred sites, and now you see the Veteran Lancer upgrade is in for MarineLorD, so Viper can no longer afford to take engagements like this one. And MarineLorD, of course, he is now adding Arbalettrier, and he's building up that eco lead. 69 villagers now, very nice for him. Army numbers looking better for him. Villager count is also looking better. And let's not forget, the guild hall is something that's also going to build up a better and better lead over time.
Yeah, certainly. And that's one of the things that, in the earlier days of Age of Empires made the French so strong is they could put this early pressure on you, but due to their passive of producing villagers faster, they could just get ahead of you as well in terms of eco and early pressure. But here comes a counter harass from the Viper. He's got a couple knights in the back of the base. Let's see how many villagers he can get. Oh, he does ride past them, but it looks like maybe just going to get one villager out of that. He doesn't even get the one villager there. It gets back into the base. So overall, very good reaction there from MarineLorD. And will these knights end up getting any value? We will find out, my friend.
Well, they are heading towards those lumberjacks, and that's going to be some great pickups over there. But here's the deal. As you send your knights to the base of MarineLorD, MarineLorD is going to send his own towards your base. So this is going to be the situation where both sides will lose villagers, and MarineLorD can afford to lose a few much easier than Viper can.
Same note, though, the villager count is kind of equalizing a little bit. Viper's at 57 and MarineLorD's at 67. He lost like 5 or 6 right there, but this is a huge fight for the French as they just have a massive numbers advantage, and it looks like the Viper is going to be committing to this. I'm surprised we're not seeing any scholars coming out with their magical healing abilities to try and support those Delhi Knights, but overall it looks like the French are able to just barely win that one, but honestly not a terrible trade for both sides.
Not at all, and this is good for Viper because, as you pointed out, he managed to cut into that villager deficit at least a tiny bit. There is still, of course, a discrepancy of 10, but obviously Viper is going to have the Castle Age eco upgrades very soon. He already has one relic, and he could potentially grab a couple more with the scholars he has. And Viper is looking better and better, so once the Owned Blades upgrades come in from the House of Learning, or no, it's actually the House of Learning.
Yes.
Not the House of Wisdom.
House of Wisdom is the Ambassador. I always get that wrong.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, actually he's not researching anything. Now that's a big mistake. Oh boy.
That's a massive blunder. I mean, imagine how much stronger his Lancers would have been here if he had had that. But yeah, it can slip by. When you're under a lot of pressure like that, it can certainly happen to anyone. So, dude, look at how quick those Delhi Scholars are, though. That Delhi Scholar is like straight up outrunning that French Knight back to the base there, which is pretty hilarious for sure. But yeah, it's kind of the calm before the storm right now, man. It looks like Delhi's just trying to get what map control they can. And, with the numbers being a little bit more equalized, maybe we could actually see Delhi control some sacred sites.
Possibly, and that's what Viper really needs. And to give some credit to Viper when it comes to grabbing those technologies, it's difficult because when you get to New Age, you have to click essentially every single technology. Multiple blacksmith techs, mining camp, lumber camp, potentially the techs on your mosques, and of course the House of Learning, so sometimes just forget some of those. That's obviously a problem for Viper, but it's understandable why this happened. This being said, he's doing a pretty good job putting pressure on MarineLorD's gold mines, and you get the feel that Viper is gaining more and more strength moving forward.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, he's done a good job staying in the game with these dual-pronged harasses. Obviously, despite his base being massively pressured, there wasn't like any battering rams or heavy finishing pieces, so I think he knew he could kind of hold with those arrow slits and those towers he had. Nonetheless, I still think MarineLorD is in a relatively commanding position. I mean, we do see 106 total supply against 81. We see a villager lead 71 to 61, and also a military advantage as well for the MarineLorD with 36 to 21. Although the harass is doing well, I think it's keeping him in the game. Without this dual-pronged harass, I think MarineLorD would be able to just laser focus in and just finish him off, but we'll see. I mean, if anybody can come back from these deficits, it's certainly going to be the dreaded Viper here.
Yeah, and he's building... Oh, a second Town Center coming up here for MarineLorD. Viper's thinking about something else, possibly. He's banking up stone, which could be for a defensive castle, which could also be even for a map control style castle, potentially securing one of the sacred sites. And that could give him a very interesting option. Him being able to research the unique tech of Delhi, which essentially turns castles into town centers. Because Viper is going to fall behind in villagers, and one way to combat that, while also getting some map control for yourself with that keep, is to grab that technology.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that tech can really catch people off guard for sure. Like dropping a beautiful keep right there in the center of the map, which would also potentially threaten that gold node that the French are working, could be huge for sure. But, MarineLorD has pretty good vision on the map. He's got his knights kind of riding about. You probably would see that coming, but again, if you pull enough villagers, you can certainly build it up quick. Looks like the Scholar is being pressured here, but he's got them. He's got those running shoes, and he is able to get away from the French Knights. As just kind of, little cab skirmishes all over the battlefield here, really. But it looks like Delhi is going to be holding on to that Sacred Site for now.
Yeah, and every minute you hold that Sacred Site, you're going to get a pretty decent resource income for that for Viper. So obviously, even if he can't continuously maintain control over that, he caps it back, he holds it for 2 or 3 minutes, that's going to pay for the investment already. But that's a lot of arbaletier now on the battlefield, and that could be concerning for Viper, because he's exclusively playing Lancers. All of those would die in a direct battle against the arbaletiers. So the only option left over here for Viper would be raiding, and that's exactly what he's doing right now.
And it looks like you kind of theorized there. We are indeed seeing the defensive castle, which I would 100% wager we're going to be seeing the villager production tech from that, and that's kind of going to serve not only to diffuse some of the pressure here from MarineLorD, but it will also, of course, allow him to catch up in terms of villagers. I do really like the play that we saw from MarineLorD with the second TC. I think that's a really, really solid veteran play right there. He probably knows he's ahead in many regards, right? But like that really is just kind of compounding his advantage, and it could help him finish off a really, strong opponent here.
And MarineLorD is also walking out for Relics. He's not going to find much though, because Viper already has 4. That's obviously something that helps cut into that villager deficit. But MarineLorD also working towards those Sacred Sites himself, so he wants to make sure that he's not falling behind on that passive gold income. And Viper, he's teching into Horsemen. So I guess it's gonna be a combo of Knights, Horsemen, and then some Mangonels, as we can see, against that big ball of arbaletier.
Yeah, certainly could work. My dreams of seeing a glorious Dumbo on the battlefield are being crushed day by day here, but it'll happen eventually. But nonetheless, Sacred Site control here for the French in the middle. Perhaps the French will set up a keep of their own there to get the influence network going, so they can build some cheap, effective units. And it looks like right now both players just kind of feeling one another out, looking for openings and weaknesses here in the defenses of their opponents. The top Sacred Site taken by Delhi once again. Man, is he just like hiding the Scholars in the bushes there and popping out and grabbing the Sacred Sites?
Yeah, that's basically it. It's like,
they're so fast.
Hey, I'm gonna capture that Sacred Site, yoink, and I'm gone.
Yeah, they're incredibly quick, man. That's always been one of the funnier things in the game for sure. But right now, MarineLorD taking a little bit of mid-map control. He does, of course, have a Siege Workshop. Looks like he's going to be getting Spring Alds to counter the Mangonels of the Viper. Obviously, Mangonels are pretty exceptional against big blobs of archers like that, but I would imagine MarineLorD will go into split formation. He does, so he doesn't get all his units popped. And if he's able to pick this Mango here, that's going to be a big pick. Mangonels are very expensive, and certainly having a critical mass of those is going to be essential for the Viper to try and deal with those. And yeah, I'm surprised that Mangonel was just left to the dogs there, but I guess he wasn't ready to take a main fight.
Yeah, he hid that in the Stealth Forest, but MarineLorD spotted that, and that's a great pickup there for MarineLorD. Viper still has a high mobility army though, and let's not underestimate 33 Lancers we're talking about, because MarineLord's army is scary with all those arbaletier, but Viper's got a defensive castle and multiple defensive towers, and Viper's got mobility. So if Viper just sort of turtles back at home with multiple defensive castles, and then simultaneously starts raiding MarineLorD, that could be a concern. And you see the Village Fortresses upgrade is not being grabbed by Viper, rather. So he's not going to use those as town centers anytime in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, hopefully for his sake as well, he got the curved blades upgrade from the House of Learning as well. That one's going to be pretty essential, essentially, with his army composition. But overall, MarineLorD, I mean, I think, like we've discussed earlier in this battle, would absolutely crush his army in a head-up fight, considering the Arbalest numbers wouldn't even be close.
He hasn't gotten own blades yet. He didn't notice that he's not researching anything on that House of Learning. That's an increasing problem now. I mean, those would be so useful. I mean, that's going to buff your Lancers so much, and that would be so helpful against the Knights of the French as well, because MarineLorD is planning an assault here, and soon Viper can no longer avoid engagements over here, and the best thing he can really field against this blob of infantry and cavalry is just, well, 35 Lancers, but those will die to the arbaletier, and 6 of his own crossbows.
Yeah, the Mangonels are obviously a useful tool, but I believe the French are also producing a substantial amount of artillery in the middle of the map. And it looks like we're going to maybe have a little bit of an engagement here as the Delhi Knights do move in, pick off a couple of those units, but now they're engaged in a head-on combat, and the crossbows are going to be unleashing a hellish amount of fire with their bonus versus heavy, dragging down those Delhi Knights, and the numbers are diminishing super quickly for the Viper as MarineLorD takes over this battle and this game.
And the Horsemen are not popping out against the arbaletier, but the arbaletier will have the extra melee armor coming in, and the Horsemen will just die to the Knights over here. This is why this comp is so dangerous here from the French. And with
Yeah.
mangonels being so weak nowadays, you don't really have a great response to those arbaletier. Well, aside from, let's say, mass archers or mass horsemen, but Viper is in no position to make a transition to either of those. And this is why it was so dangerous for Viper to go so heavy on those Lancer plays. As long as he was the aggressor and he was the one initiating the fights, it worked out. But now that MarineLorD is going to launch a direct assault, it's no longer going to work.
Yeah, it's going to be incredibly tough. MarineLorD's got the center of the map. He's happily mining gold. I mean, granted, the Viper does have a couple relics, if I'm not mistaken, but now the Spring ult of the French are pushing back. French Knights diving in. It looks like one of the trebuchets is going to be going down here, and the French army is just putting so much pressure on the Delhi here, and they also have their own trebuchets slowly killing the military infrastructure here of the Delhi to ensure that they're not going to be able to produce and keep up with the rate of the French aggression.
Yeah, army numbers heavily favoring MarineLorD here. I mean, we're looking at double the army for MarineLorD. He still has 31 arbaletier. His knight numbers have been decimated, so were the ones from Viper. So no more knights on the battlefield for either side, to be honest. But obviously, MarineLorD is in a great defensive position. Looks like he didn't spot that castle going up, though, so Viper's gonna get away with that. And it's going to take some time for MarineLorD to take it down with his own trebs. He actually has just one trebuchet, and that's buying a lot of precious time for Viper.
Yeah, certainly. I believe a second one may have just come out. The castle play up there, quite nice for sure, but look at the villager difference as well. We have 77 villagers for Viper and 116 for MarineLorD. That is a massive lead. He also has that really good center position, of course, which is giving the influence to all of those siege workshops and those stables. So he's just going to be producing and just getting a ton of value just across the board in conjunction with his economic lead. And now it looks like the trebuchets for MarineLorD are going to be getting in position for one of the most important pushes here, which is taking down that primary base castle.
Yeah, if that castle goes up, Viper's base is lying wide open, and it's going to be difficult to respond to an attack coming from that direction. So keeping that castle alive as long as possible is imperative for Viper. And for MarineLorD, getting some walls up would be really helpful, because he wants to focus on that direct push. You don't want to just always deal with these pesky little knights moving to the back of your food eco all the time. Oh, looks like MarineLorD might get a kill on that trebuchet, actually. Oh, looks like not. Spring ult gets taken down.
Yeah, he loses the spring. It looks like you said, MarineLorD is beginning his ascension to building some walls back in his base. So he does have some on the eastern side. I would imagine he'll start doing something similar on the west eventually, but the forward pressure here is so heavy, and you can see the keep for the Delhi Sultanate is pretty close to going down, if I'm not mistaken. And again, the army numbers pretty massively favoring the MarineLorD, 78 to 45 and 122 to 80. Granted, did he ever get the tech for producing villagers out of the keeps for Delhi?
No, he didn't. He's actually just now grabbing boiling oil even. Viper's army is not back on track. He's got a decent amount of horsemen on the battlefield, but that castle is now lit on fire. Viper is yet to start repairing that. MarineLorD has 4 trebuchets worth of firepower, so you can't keep that alive for a lot longer. You see, Viper is depleting his wood bank really fast here. In fact, he's even going to lose this castle despite repairing it with 20. And now the base of Viper is lying wide open against MarineLorD, who's sitting at 200 population, actually banking up resources for Imperial even.
Yeah, he could even just start throwing away armies here, essentially, just pushing them into unfavorable situations. And if Viper wants to have, even try and push back against the French, he's going to have to push into keeps and really entrench position. So it looks like Viper going to be taking the fight here. The French Knights ride forth to meet the Knights of the Delhi Sultanate, and the crossbows are just doing a bunch of damage. But again, some horsemen do get on top of them, but the critical mass of archers and crossbows there are just doing so much work as the trebuchets continue to just destroy the base of the Viper.
Yeah, and that's the thing right now. Both players are playing with knights and crossbows, but both of those units are better for the French over here. And now MarineLorD is just unleashing hell on the base of Viper. Viper knows he can't stop this one. He's going to tap out, and MarineLorD takes game number 1.
Yeah, certainly an incredible match. I mean, the French do have a massive advantage as it pertains to knights, like you said. But had we seen that honed blades researched a little bit earlier, I mean, we saw so many fights that were kind of close in that mid and late game. And had we had like those minor things like honed blades, which really adds a substantial amount of damage to your knights as Delhi, maybe we could have seen some different engagements. But overall, I think MarineLorD had pretty good control that game. He was able to deny Delhi the sacred sites. I mean, Delhi had a sacred site maybe for like a minute at one point, but overall, I don't think he was really able to benefit too much from that, except in the very beginning of the game. And MarineLorD scaled very well with the second TC and was able to defend most of those raids relatively effectively as well.